So we wanted to be sure today to cover how robotics is sort of infiltrating all sorts of different workplaces. And the one workplace where most of us spend most of our time is the office. And I think the way in which you're seeing robots start to show up in the office is mainly these days through telepresence. And so there's this really interesting collision happening between classic sort of video conferencing and robotics. And these guys are the ones who are making that collision happen. So I'm really excited to have on our panel today Keller Rinaudo from Romotive, all the way from Las Vegas. Thank you for coming. Hi.
Sure.
David Cann, founder of Double Robotics, down here at the end.
Hi. Yeah, Hi. We're based in Sunnyvale here.
All the way from Sunnyvale. Thank you. And from Revolve Robotics, Marcus Rosenthal.
Hi.
All right.
We're up in San Francisco.
All right, I'm going to ask each of you guys to tell us a little bit about what your company is doing, and then we'll have a discussion. And some of you brought some stuff. You all brought stuff. Awesome, okay. David, you want to start?
Sure. So this is our product right here, our first product. It's called the Double. It is a telepresence robot based around an iPad. So you slip your iPad right here, and you can drive around while you're on a FaceTime call. It's as simple as that, and the training takes about that long as well. People just pick it right up, and they can drive from another iPad or a web browser. And so, yeah, we're very, very close to shipping our very first units, which is very exciting. And we've had a lot of interest over the last 6 months that we've been launched publicly. And it goes up to about 5 feet tall and down to about sitting height here, so you can be sitting in a meeting or walking around talking to people standing up.
All right, so do you steer it from a PC or from another iPad? Or
from another iPad or a web browser, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's got some levers or pedals, right? It's got some props so that it doesn't. So
yeah, so it has kickstands here that come out when
kickstand.
When it's not on, not balancing, but it generally balances to drive around.
And so, can you talk a little bit about how this changes the experience of being remotely present in an office?
Yeah. So we're hearing from our beta customers basically that it takes, a lot of them are already using Skype and things like that, as everybody does in their offices. But for remote workers, people who are most of the time not at the office, it really takes the experience out of scheduling a meeting with them or having a meeting with them to them just being at the office. So they just happen to be there during birthday parties, or when somebody's talking at the water cooler, or something's happening, you just say, hey, what's going on, or what's happening over there, and they can just drive right over and be there as if they were already in the office. And so it changes the perspective from scheduling time with them to actually them just being there, which I think is a key factor for them in order to have this be a necessary product in their environment, because that enables them to hire more remote workers, because the hardest thing with remote workers is that you can't, you have team cohesion issues, and you feel like they're not actually part of the team, they're not actually there, and so this really alleviates that, especially for knowledge workers, which is most of us today.
Cool. Keller, are you ready to go there?
Yeah, sorry.
All right. You want to go next?
Sure. So we're a little different. I know you and I talked about it a little bit. We don't think of Romo as being focused on telepresence, but about 2 years ago, we started playing with the idea of putting an iPhone on a robot and building something. We always really wanted to build something that was affordable for anyone, and we especially wanted to make it for 12-year-old versions of ourselves. And so we decided that we wanted to, basically when we were looking at robots, we decided that they were either really cheap pieces of plastic that you could buy on Amazon for like 50 or 60 bucks, and whatever they did when you got them was what they did when they broke a month later. Or you could spend thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, on robots that actually did a lot of the things that robots typically do in science fiction movies. But we didn't have very much money when we were starting the company, and we were like, well, we can't afford those robots, so we really wanted to build something that was in between, that would be powerful enough to do things like computer vision, be Wi-Fi enabled, possibly autonomously navigate, be able to do those sorts of things, but be cheap enough for anyone. And so the way we decided to do that was basically to leverage the processor that everybody is already carrying around in their pockets in the form of an iPhone. And so we built Romo. So Romo costs $150. He's a robot that anyone can train. So we're very inspired by everything that Rodney is doing in terms of making it insanely simple to create behaviors for the robot. We think that if you're going to put robots into people's homes, those people, whether they're engineers or not, need to be able to figure out how to just customize the robot and teach it to do the things that they want it to do. And so, yeah, this guy is our first iteration. We just shipped 1,500 robots last month. We have another 3,500 robots shipping this month. And it just also so happens that you can use them for telepresence. You can actually log into them. We use actually, I think, the same video streaming stack that you guys use, but you can log into them from any iOS device or through any browser.
So there's a component of the experience where you're able to kind of see where Romo is going, right, from the remote browser or app, right, and steer it around. That's like,
it streams two-way video and audio. So I mean, we think of it as any telepresence robot. It's kind of like Skype on wheels, and it's really magical. We don't see Romo used as much though in scenarios of like the office. We see it being used a lot more with families, and I think that if you want to make telepresence accessible to families, so for example, a grandma playing hide and go seek with her granddaughter, or an aunt logging in and babysitting her nieces for a couple hours while mom takes a break. These sorts of things are actually really powerful and cool ways to use robots, but most families in the US don't have thousands of dollars to spend on robots.
So if you call it telepresence, it feels like work and people...
Yeah, we actually call it family presence. Jen, who's sitting in the back, came up with that. So.
Okay, all right, cool. Marcus, tell us about, is it Cubby or Kubi?
Kubi.
Kubi, okay. So this is also something that works either in the home or the office, right?
Yeah, it can really work in either one. We designed it to be consumer accessible. But so Kubi is literally means neck in Japanese, and it's really a neck for tablets. So for telepresence, lets you look around remote environments. And so we went out and started talking with initial customers and realized that, like, especially in the workplace and meeting spaces, that the main value of the telepresence was once you get there, that you're sitting with the people and you want to interact, you want the ability to look around as you normally would have, maybe look up at the whiteboard. And so that's where we've really concentrated Kubi. This one's one of our developer units. Actually, my business partner, Ilya, is in the back. There's a production unit he's controlling from up in our office in San Francisco.
Hey, Ilya.
And what we really wanted to do was actually similar to all of our bots, is really leverage the commodity hardware that's out there that has all these, great processors, displays, all those things that used to be the expensive part of robotics, and turn it into a real affordable system. So these are only $249. And then make it so it's really compatible, like in especially a business environment. Every business has a different preference of what video conferencing tools they want to be using. So we wanted to make it compatible with all of them. So we've come up with a way to kind of have it run in the background, but also working to get integrated ones as well.
Okay, so the person on the remote end of an interaction with Kubi is basically able to use a button or a slider or something to turn it in different directions?
Right, so we've created, it's called a tap to position interface, so where you now just tap anywhere within the control workspace and it moves to that position. And they remotely control it from any web browser. We're also going to create an app so it can run from any device.
All right, great. So that's sort of the introductions, and you've gotten a look at the robots, and I think all these guys will be available out in the lobby, during the networking break to kind of give you a closer look at these robots. But let's kind of dive into some of these issues here. So I want to talk first about the selling points for your robots. When you're going out and trying to explain why it's so cool to be able to see someone on the other end of a remote interaction, or to play around, to be on the receiving end and to have someone wander into your office remotely via the double or via Romo. What appeals to people about that? Why do people think that's cool?
Well, what's kind of interesting from our perspective is that we get all kinds of new use cases all the time. We'll mention people like, the obvious one, if you have a remote worker who wants to, come into your office, you probably already do Skype with them, right? Now they can actually drive around. They get that, but then they get ideas in their head about, well, I'm actually a real estate agent, so maybe I could have people come and visit this home remotely, and get more people to come to this open house that I'm having, or whatever it is, or there's the school use case, all these kind of things. Where we have a kid who's in the hospital or something like that could actually attend school on a robot. I'm sure you've seen the Verizon commercial that's been out there. And so all kinds of new use cases come up all the time, which is really exciting for us. And so we're going to be testing those over the next 6 months or so and seeing which ones it actually works for in those use cases. It may not work for all of them, but so we don't really have a problem explaining it. Usually you just start explaining how they're going to use it, what the potential use cases are, and just start them on a couple, and they just start rattling them off, all the new ones, whatever it is, security or anything else. So so I guess our use case, I think that these guys will probably say the same thing, that it's kind of obvious, like this should exist,
Is that the case with?
I would definitely agree on that point, that it's really that people want to have a presence in another location. You always have way too many meetings, or you don't want to travel, or even like some real interesting ones are people that are remote workers that want to have an always-on connection with their team. Like more and more people are trying to telecommute, but if you're only doing it over email or occasional phone calls, those sorts of things, you don't have that same sort of collaboration with your team. And so if you can, say, put Kubi right at the end of the table cluster of, say, the 4 people that you're really working closely with, now you can just turn and talk to them at any point and interact. And you have the feeling of being there because you're now in control of where you look. You're not kind of just trapped in a webcam with one view, and if somebody walks away, that you're no longer there.
And what kinds of use cases are people coming up with when you hand them a unit? What do they go do with it? What's the first thing they do with it?
I mean, everyone obviously, first just tries to see the full range of motion, but I mean, there's interesting ones from, a lot of people are saying, oh, I want this, to give to my kid's grandparents so that, I don't have to be holding the laptop around anymore, to, people that, like an interesting one that kind of came up was, there's a lot of video for sign language translation for companies. So like a retailer, they're required, when you're a large enough retailer, they're required to have sign language translation. And the person isn't necessarily going to be, making sure as they're doing the sign language that their hands are in the proper view. And so this way you can, the person remotely can control that and actually keep in that view.
And Keller, do you even have to sell this, or does it just kind of sell itself?
Well, to talk really quickly about Telepresence, I mean, all I'll add, because what you guys are saying is exactly what we've found, but all I'll add is that we actually think that being in the same physical space as somebody is even more important when you're having an emotional interaction rather than just like a business or information-sided one. So I think that it is oftentimes easier to communicate just information or something like that through Skype or Facebook or even just texting or emailing. But I think when you're trying to interact with a 6-year-old or if you're trying to have an emotional conversation or even just attend a family event where you're kind of like, you want to be part of the space, it's actually really important that you be able to move in that space and they feel like you have a physical presence. So that's why we think that it's really, really exciting, the idea of these robots that can move around and stream video. And we think that it's applicable not just to businesses, but also to families.
Okay. So at this point, these things are all, I don't mean this in a demeaning way, but they're sort of novelties. And I'm sure when you put down a double or a Kubi or Romo in a room for the first time, people are just kind of fixated on the technology. Mm-hmm. But I'm wondering, how quickly does the interface begin to disappear? How quickly do people forget that the worker that they're interacting with is actually, a face on an iPad and he's kind of balancing, or that he's on this robotic stand, or that somebody's steering this iPhone robot? Do they forget that at some point? Do you see people like just having the interaction and over time focusing less on the gadget?
That's really the goal. Is to be able to have as much of a hands-free operation on both sides as you can. And our users initially, they come in and they're like, okay, how does this work? But quickly find that, and then they start realizing that it's almost as natural as just looking around normally.
Yeah, I agree. We have the uptake is very quickly. I mean, like the first day, everybody's playing around with it. Oh, I want to drive the robot, whatever. But then the novelty wears off after a day or so, and then they actually just use it for a real thing, and it becomes that person. It's almost best when you have one person assigned to this one robot, because that is the person now, rather than, oh, I'm actually going to use a robot now. I'm actually just going to be there and just be on there. It's just, it's just their face there. They're just a little bit skinnier now. So it's really, the uptake that's not really been a problem for us. I think that it's really, if it's solving a problem for them, then it's not, then the novelty factor is not as much of an issue, which may actually point to a larger point about, robotics research traditionally has been, well, we need to find a use case for this. We got this really cool thing that works. We need to find a use case. I think all three of our companies really are being pulled from the market, like, oh, we really want to do these things. Can you make a technology in order to do this kind of thing, or improve this workplace for us, or improve this situation? So I think that all these new companies that are popping up now are based on that idea, which is a really exciting transition for robotics in general, to be able to be pulled from the market and actually solving a real problem, rather than simply making a cool technology and then trying to find some way to fit it into the market.
Yeah, this is supposed to be fun, right? So you're not supposed to stop having fun with it, but do people eventually forget they're talking to Romo and just talk to their grandkid or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, so it's weird, right? Because there's a little bit of, I think there's cognitive dissonance for adults when they hear like, oh, like, grandma's running around on the floor and she just like ran and hid under the couch. But kids don't actually find that weird. So it's definitely magical. For us, again, we didn't actually build Romo as a telepresence robot. Our goal was to create something that could get kids really excited about technology and computer science, and build something that would essentially allow lots of different people to create behaviors for the robot and share them. But we definitely had a couple really like eyebrow-raising moments where we were just watching these interactions between family members, where there's no technological interface, and this idea of being able to like move towards someone to indicate like playfulness or aggression, and then like move back to indicate like giving up or hiding. It's just like, this is the way that we think as humans. This is how we're wired, and I think that yeah, it's really magical, and the technology fades away.
Okay, I want to talk about the fact that all three of these devices have things in them. There is an iPhone on the Romo, and you guys are showing off iPads. So to what extent are the innovations that you guys have been working on sort of predicated on everything that's been going on in the mobile world? In this case, they all happen to be Apple devices, but there's no particular reason these couldn't be Android devices, right? Or even BlackBerries for that matter, right? So what's going on here? Is the smarts in this kind of robotics actually migrating to mobile platforms? And if so, like what was the rest of the equation that had to be solved? What are the robotics things you guys had to invent to make these things possible?
I think that the ubiquity of smart devices is going to make it's going to lead to a lot of disruption in hardware in general. I mean, when you combine that also with the fact that Wi-Fi is basically everywhere. If not, it will be soon, and I think it'll be open and free. And then also, you can look at like the rise of 3D printing, and like the fact that we may be able to say, hey, we just designed something new for Romo, just print it, and assume that all of our users might be able to just print that thing in their own homes, like as Rodney was talking about. All of those things are really exciting, and I think that there's this distinction we have right now, which is like, oh, an iPhone is something for communication, but these devices have processors and sensors and displays and Wi-Fi chips that are going to be useful for all kinds of hardware devices that people may want operating in their homes. And they are produced at such mass scale. I think that's really the key. They're produced at such mass scale that in some cases you pay less for the device than the hardware actually costs, which is happening with the iPhone because of contracts. But what that means is that you can buy a refurbished iPod Touch for $75. Or families have an extra iPhone sitting around that's basically free hardware if you can figure out how to repurpose it. So,
Yeah, we're basically using the same technology that's a gyro and accelerometer that's in your phone right now. Everybody has them, and so that it costs us what, $5 or $10 as a component, and it's extremely cheap now. Whereas 5 or 10 years ago, that would have been very expensive. It would have been hundreds of dollars just for that one component. And our price point on this is actually just $2,500 total, and so you would have paid that much just for your sensors and your PCB. So like you say, the mass scale right now is just enabling all these different kinds of things, and all we're doing basically is adding some motors, and it's basically what you guys are doing too. So,
but then it's also about the ease of use of phones and tablets that even a grandma or executive or anybody can install an app onto a mobile device, and that's where Apple is really concentrated their energy around. Is that, and if you can make it the same way for anybody to load a new application, or even for that matter create a new application for the robot within all that ecosystem that's just thriving. I mean, we can't, you got to pay iOS developers a lot of money today because they're such a hot commodity. So kind of take into that ease of use of the devices.
Absolutely. Okay. So we've been talking a lot in previous sessions about this question of whether robots take jobs away in the big picture, and I have a hard time kind of thinking of anyone whose job might be threatened by Romo or Kubi or Double. So my first question, very quick answer, is can you imagine actually putting somebody out of work with this robot?
I'd see it the other way,
right,
that now companies could actually hire someone that's across the country, and they could be much more useful and collaborate with the team,
right,
rather than the other way around.
Right. Okay. And
well, I mean, I can imagine that the exact opposite being true. I mean, I know that I know that some telepresence companies say, hey, this is great because if you don't need a receptionist full time, you just have a robot, and you can have one person controlling 20 robots. So essentially, you could replace 20 receptionists with one robot controller who logs into those robots at different times. But on the other hand, so you can imagine these. But I guess that happens anytime you make workers more efficient. But on the other hand, on the other side of things, I actually think with telepresence, there's a really fascinating potential to allow people to have more experiences and to consume more. You can imagine, I mean, we think about Google Glass a lot and think that that's really exciting, and the idea of being able to use Google Glass to, when you're sitting at home, just via a heads-up display, log into a robot in Paris, for example, and take a tour of a museum or walk down the street. And so I guess you can also imagine telepresence robots making it a lot more possible for people to consume more experiences and do more things in one lifetime. You could almost lead several lives at once.
I mean, you can instantly jump from one, virtually teleport from one location to another with them.
Yeah. So maybe that would help the economy by basically allowing people to visit more museums. I don't know, partake in more experiences.
I think the issue with losing jobs in this country especially is less about whether there's a job available and more about where it is. It's very difficult for people to move for a job, but I know every company around here is pretty much hiring right now, right? And a lot of companies around the country are hiring, but you can't find the right worker that's in the right location for the right job right now. And so as we can enable people to work more remotely, I think that will open up more job opportunities for the people who are not in the places where the jobs exist right now, and they don't have to try to sell their house in a bad housing economy. So.
Wait, what about robotic sex?
I think there's a word for that.
Teledildonics.
Yes.
Come to the after party.
Really interesting.
So the last question I want to end with is really about jobs again, but from the opposite perspective. Here, you guys are the founders of 3 startups that wouldn't have existed unless this technology had started to come together. The mobile brains plus the robot stuff you've built. So can you each say a little bit about your companies and how many people you've put to work? And Keller, I know you did a Kickstarter campaign, so you've got new people plus you're tapping into this brand new sort of crowdfunding mechanism that exists that didn't exist a few years ago. So the more robot companies there are, the more roboticists are going to be having jobs at least, even if no one else is working, the roboticists are. Tell us about your companies and how many people you've got, and how you built your companies.
So I guess the really short version, we started when we were as 3 people. We built the simplest version of Romo, and we didn't have strong robotics backgrounds. I don't think anybody believed that we were going to be able to successfully build a robot. Nobody was willing to give us money. And so we decided, well, we really ought to build something that we think we can sell right now, because otherwise we're not going to, this company's not going to last long. And so we designed the initial robot, Romo, as a little it was like a little acrylic box that you could put your iPhone on top of, and it communicated with the circuit board via analog signals from the headphone jack. Everybody thought it was a really bad idea. People were telling us that there was no way that people were going to put their phones on a robot. It was too expensive. It couldn't do anything useful. It was just a toy. And do people really need personal robotics anyway, personal robots? And so we ended up putting it on Kickstarter and found out that there are a whole bunch of other nerds like you guys who actually think it is really cool and think that there is a future in personal robots. And so since then, we've grown to about 18 people. We're moving the company to the Bay Area in the next couple months. Yeah, I mean, we've hired people from everywhere, but we tend to look for, we view what we do as a combination of technology and design. And I think that it's really interesting because generally in mobile and web, you've seen almost all the innovation has been in design. It's not fundamentally technologically pushing the human race forward. And then on the other side, you see robotics where it's actually almost everybody's just doing the technology, and there's so little in our minds done, at least on the research side, in terms of designing this technology to be really accessible and fun, and have a robot that you would actually want to have playing with your kids, as opposed to you look at it and you're like, that's going to enslave my kids. And so that's how we think about the people we hire.
Awesome. Okay, Marcus, you came out of Lemnos Labs, right? Which is a hardware incubator, hardware accelerator. So can you actually fill us in about, a lot of people may not even be aware that the sort of accelerator phenomenon is now popping up in the hardware world, and you were one of the first graduates of Lemnos, right?
Yeah, we were in the second class, but so Lemnos Labs, it's based in San Francisco, and there's a warehouse that there's now been 10, or actually just 11th company just joined up, that have gone through there so far, and it's all companies that are focused on building hardware products, so providing tools, resources, shared resources that help those companies succeed. So it's been a pretty interesting experience.
And how many people do you have on your team?
So we started out with 2 founders. We now currently have 4 people on board. We have 3 job recs out for software, manufacturing people, if anyone here is interested. But we also, as being a fairly lean startup, so Lemnos Labs does invest $50,000 to $100,000 in companies. So we had that to help kick us off the ground. But being a lean startup, we leveraged a lot of contractors. So we had anywhere from 5 to 8 contractors that were helping software, marketing, different aspects of the business as well. So you can kind of say about 10 people, and continue to see it growing.
And it's getting easier to start a hardware company, right?
Yes, yeah, that's one thing with especially different rapid prototyping tools are really enabling us to do that. I mean, these are our developer units, and we now can build these up in about 30 minutes. Just laser cut parts, made a mold off a 3D printed part, and kind of off-the-shelf components or rapid prototype where you don't need to necessarily go and wait 10 to 12 weeks for injection molding tooling.
Great. And then David, what's the founding story at Double?
Sure. So my co-founder and I met on the TV show BattleBots about 10 years ago. And so we've been involved with robotics for a really long time. But we've been talking over the years on and off about, what kind of product could we make that would be really cool, that would leverage our skills. I'm a software guy, he's a hardware guy, and we kind of meet in the robotics area. And it was really the catalyst was the iPad 2 that came out with the camera, the front-facing camera. We said, oh, obviously this thing should exist, and we had a need for it ourselves because we were working on another product, and we'd have it made overseas, and just it was expenses of traveling there was just prohibitive for a startup, and so we said, hey, you know what? We could make this. This is pretty easy, you know. And so you know, a year and a half later now, we've actually made it. And we were in Y Combinator program last summer, and that was really great for us. And since then, we've grown to 7 people now. And yeah, so we're just about ready to ship units now. So it's an exciting time.
All right, great. So I want to talk with you guys after, because next year we'll offer discounted tickets to this event if people want to attend via Telepresence.
There you go.
I guess Ilya snuck in free, but
Yeah. You just have to buy one of these robots first. Okay. All right, thanks guys. I really appreciate it. This has been fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks.